Cast your mind back 25,000 years. It's late on a warm spring afternoon in what we now call southern France, and you're gathering firewood a short way from your camp. The men are out hunting, carrying spears and seeking out game like deer and bison. You and your fellow nomads look pretty much like modern humans, but life is very different. Not least because of the ever-present risk that it will end suddenly. At 28 years old, you're doing quite well for a prehistoric woman. There are risks everywhere. A tiny scratch could get infected and kill you. You could meet a sudden end in an accident or animal attack. Or other prehistoric humans, hungry and desperate, could murder you in a fight. Most tragic of all, though, out of the 5 children you've given birth to, 2 have died. One shortly after birth from what we'd now understand to be a serious fever, and another aged 3, who you buried just a month ago. Prehistory is a dangerous place to live, and death seems to strike at random, often without obvious cause. There's no understanding of germs or birth defects. Perhaps you blame capricious, vengeful gods or spirits in an attempt to make sense of it all. It's hard for us to work out exactly how long prehistoric humans lived, not least because prehistory is defined as the period prior to written records. There were no birth certificates or insurance companies compiling detailed mortality tables. However, surveys of bones at a handful of archaeological sites, plus extrapolation from modern hunter-gatherer societies, give us some idea. And it's at once better and worse than you might expect. First, the bad news. Life expectancy was poor, probably somewhere between 30 and 35 years. Statistically speaking, a lot of you listening to this would already be dead. However, life expectancy is a number which can obscure as much as it reveals. This is because it's an average, and comes with all the attendant statistical pitfalls. The main reason that it was so strikingly low in prehistory was the appalling rate of infant and child mortality. Infections in the first few years of life struck down many, many babies and children. You probably only had a 60% chance of making it to 15 years old. Barely better than tossing a coin. This huge number of deaths at young ages drags down the average age at death significantly. However, if your coin came up heads and you made it to your late teens, you could expect to live another 35 or 40 years, taking you comfortably into your 50s. This remaining life expectancy is itself an average, so it's quite likely that a few ancient humans did make it into their 60s or 70s, what we in modern times would start to call old age. A headline 35-year life expectancy both masks the terrible toll of childhood deaths and underplays how long the oldest early humans lived. Such is the challenge of summarising a complex phenomenon like human lifespan with a single number. This was the story for tens of thousands of years. Eye-watering levels of child mortality held overall life expectancy down. Most who made it to adulthood lived decent but not exceptionally long lives. For millennia, death was an omnipresent feature of human life, often rapid and without warning. Those who escaped the capricious clutches of infectious disease, injury, or bad luck were greeted by an inexplicable state of decline, which we'd now recognise as ageing. A gradual loss of faculties in a world where fitness, keen senses, and mental acuity could be the difference between eating and being eaten. It can be tempting to think of prehistoric humans as primitive, but their brains were actually very similar to our own. It seems likely that this constant, senseless loss would take its toll. While we can only speculate, there are sites where human or pre-human remains are found together, suggesting some kind of deliberate disposal of the dead. There's an ongoing debate about when exactly funeral rituals arose. Many, of course, would leave no trace which could survive the intervening millennia. But if these sites are what they appear, funeral behaviour could date back tens or even hundreds of thousands of years, to a time before our species, Homo sapiens, when our hominin ancestors walked and aged upon the earth. As we transition into recorded history, our preoccupation with death is hard to deny. Increasingly extravagant structures culminating in the pyramids of ancient Egypt, which formed the engineering pinnacle of increasingly rich mythologies surrounding life and its end. Given this, it's perhaps not surprising that some of the earliest philosophers grappled with aging and death. In ancient Greece, Socrates and Epicurus were unworried by dying, believing it would be like eternal, dreamless sleep. Plato was similarly sanguine, but for different reasons. He believed that our immortal soul would go on existing, even after our bodies had ceased to. Aristotle was more concerned by death, and arguably the first philosopher to make a serious attempt to explain aging scientifically in 350 BCE. His central thesis was that it was a process by which humans and animals dry out. As you'll note from its absence in the rest of this book, sadly his theory hasn't stood the test of time.